Welcome to Women Mastering Midlife, where we dive deep into the rich complexities of womanhood in our middle years. I'm your host, Victoria Byrd, a pharmacist, certified women's health coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Whether you're navigating perimenopause, thriving in menopause, or mastering midlife's many transitions, this is your weekly dose of expert guidance, compassionate support, and a judgment-free space to explore it all. Here, we're empowering women to master midlife on their terms, reclaiming our health, our happiness, and our power. Together, we'll rewrite the narrative around this remarkable stage of life, from something to dread into a beautiful, bold transition. I'm so glad you're here. Today's conversation is one I have been especially excited to bring to this community because it addresses a gap that many women feel but struggle to name. I am joined by Lauren Tetenbaum, a menopause educator, advocate, and author of Millennial Menopause. Lauren's work focuses on a population that is often overlooked in menopause conversations: millennial women who are experiencing perimenopausal symptoms earlier than expected and frequently being dismissed, misdiagnosed, or told that they are too young for what they're feeling. In her writing and advocacy, Lauren brings language, validation, and clarity to a generation navigating hormone changes alongside careers, caregiving, fertility decisions, and mental health pressures. Today, we're talking about what millennial menopause really looks like, why symptoms are showing up earlier, how cultural and medical systems are falling short, and what women can do to feel informed, supported, and empowered during this transition. Thank you for joining me, Lauren. I'm really excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things that I was saying before we hit record is that, when I turned 40, this is when I dug into menopause, because for me, no one agreed that I was old enough to be experiencing what I was experiencing. I was being, tossed around and not being handled not being taken seriously. And the answer was just, here's an antidepressant, here's a sleeping pill, and treating the symptoms and not really understanding what's going on. So I'm so excited that you wrote this book and you're advocating for this specific group of women.
Thank you. And yes, I see that all the time. Women continue to get dismissed, and it's time for change, and women need to be educated and informed so that they can navigate this with clarity and be proactive.
So what was that moment that you were like, I have to get this on paper and I need to get it out in a book?
Sure. So I've always loved writing. I went to law school. I've always been an advocate for women. And I became a therapist to focus, of course, on women's mental health, especially during big transition moments. And something that had stuck with me as a mom myself was all of the confusion around the identity shift when women become mothers. I so frequently hear things like, why didn't anyone talk about this? Why didn't I know? And I went to a women's networking event that happened to be about menopause. I met Ann Fullenwider, who's the co-founder of Alloy, and the women in that room kept saying things like, I wish I had known, I wish I had been warned. And it resonated with me so deeply in terms of the perinatal mental health symptoms that I was familiar with. And I thought, well, why does my generation have to be looking back at this and feeling confused and feeling disenfranchised? We don't. So I'm going to start telling everyone, I'm going to ask questions, write down the answers, and it became the book.
That's terrific. Yeah, we have so much. We have the education in middle school and high school about sex ed. And then we get some, maybe that's true. And then we get some prenatal education and maybe some, once we have the baby, we have some support a little bit, not all the time, but some post-delivery care. And then it just kind of falls off. It's like we figure it out, we suffer in silence, we get dismissed. So I'm really excited that this is a topic of conversation for us. I was born in 1980, so I'm that weird, like Gen X doesn't want me, I'm too young. And the millennials are like, you're kind of on the old side for us. So
we'll take you.
Thank you. Because I feel like it is a big topic of conversation that really doesn't get understood. I know, in menopause, the hormones, they're not as fluctuating as they are in perimenopause. And so perimenopause is a really wild ride. And the fact that it can start 10 years earlier, you're looking at mid to late 30s that you can even start experiencing symptoms.
Exactly. And every menopause specialist that I spoke to said that perimenopause was more complex to treat. And even as I really enhanced my education in this space, I became a Menopause Society certified practitioner. I just went to every conference, every event. I learned, I keep reading and listening to things. But the focus really has still been on menopause, which of course is great and much needed. But what about perimenopause when we know that women are really at risk of mood issues, maybe even suicidality, and they just don't know? They don't have the language for perimenopause, for these hormonal shifts. And it's inevitable. So we have to enter this phase with knowledge.
So, what are you seeing in the difference between the millennials and the Gen Xers and the boomers? What have you seen in this population?
Sure. So, boomers that I speak with, including those women in my mother's generation, are often very delighted to hear about my project and encouraging and saying, this is such a great resource. I wish I had had it. I was offered no treatment options, or maybe I was even discouraged from taking hormone therapy following the WHI. And they're very supportive. Gen X also extremely supportive. And of course, they've blown open the doors on this conversation. And I'm so grateful that they've been demanding more. And millennials in general are still a bit reluctant to embrace this idea of midlife, middle age. They think that we're not quite old enough. And I get that because our society doesn't view aging fondly. But that's sort of the point, that aging is inevitable if we're lucky enough. I do believe it's a privilege, and we should know what that looks like and be as healthy as possible in this phase of life.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like this generation in particular is one of the first to really have, there's been careers all along for women, but now women have really gotten into the workforce in a whole new level. And your generation, our generation, I guess, I'll take it on too.
Join us. Officially.
Yes, I will. I feel like, one of the issues that you're seeing with menopause in the workplace, right? It's not mandated education yet for the United States. We're way behind the UK on this. And I think that, it is a talking piece because it's affecting women who are trying to climb a ladder in their company. They're hitting a second glass ceiling when it comes to promotions and salaries. They're missing days of work because of symptoms. And so how are you seeing that affecting women from the workplace standpoint?
In an unfortunately negative way, women are feeling like they need to cut back on or leave the workforce, the paid workforce altogether, which of course has huge implications, not only for their own financial security, but also for greater gender equity, for the economy, and of course for the company that should be retaining talent. And it's really upsetting to see, but I understand why. When women are not feeling good or feeling like their workplace isn't supportive, I understand why they feel like this is their quote unquote only choice. But the reality is that it's not. It doesn't have to be this way. Suffering is not inevitable. Employers absolutely can do things to support women in midlife. And some of it starts simply with education, which really is quite easy to offer. You and I would happily go and teach. And a lot of employees are saying that that's what they want. And of course, there's other ways for companies or employers to help their team members by offering healthcare coverage or access to thermostats or whatever it might be. I always say employers should ask what employees want before they start offering things.
Yeah. Well, and women, we're not just going to say it's not common conversation yet. And there's a lot of stigma and there's a lot of jokes and memes about menopause. And so I've talked to a lot of women who feel afraid to talk about it at work because it will keep them from the boardroom meetings.
Right. Gender discrimination, ageism, the motherhood penalty, those are all very real. And that's almost why I think it's important. I don't want to say more important, but it is very important for allies, for women way ahead of menopause, way past menopause, everyone to be talking about this and advocating for it. Because often when you're in the throes of it, it's difficult. Maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you don't have any energy to add something like advocating for menopause policies to your plate. I get that. But this really is an issue that affects everyone, and it's in everyone's best interest to advocate for it. So do it now before you really need it.
Yeah. A lot of times women have said that the beginning of their symptoms are more mood based. You're seeing the anxiety, the 3 a.m. doom drops. One of my favorite menopause journalists likes to call it the 3 a.m. doom drops. It's a lot of the mental feelings and the palpitations, anxiety. Are you seeing that when you were talking to women and writing this book?
Absolutely. And of course, I continue to see it. And I know you've had other guests on, like Dr. Jordan, who notices that the way that we've been talking about perimenopause has been largely around the menstrual cycle. But so many women don't get a cycle for a variety of reasons, or they are still getting a regular cycle, regular for them, and yet experiencing these mood fluctuations or different mood symptoms like sudden onset of anxiety or rage and irritability. And they are told by their gynecologists, et cetera, well, you're still getting a period, so everything's normal there and you're far away from menopause. Of course, that dismissal doesn't help, makes them feel worse. And it can be very scary to not recognize yourself. And that's often what women report, that they don't feel like themselves.
Yeah, I remember in my early 40s, just like I didn't feel excited about things. I was like, it's just kind of all felt blah. Like, is this just the way things are going to be kind of settled in? And I don't know. I definitely feel like now that I've had hormone therapy on board for a couple of years and really taken some lifestyle choices and changed some things, it does make a huge difference.
That's great. And I know you mentioned earlier an SSRI, an antidepressant, and I do think too many women are offered that as the only solution. And it shouldn't be the only solution. That being said, it can be an incredibly helpful tool in our toolbox. So can hormone therapy, so can cognitive behavioral therapy, lifestyle changes. So any and all of the above, and women deserve information and access to any and all of the above.
Yeah. So in your book, can you kind of break down if somebody were to open it up, what are they going to find when they look at your book?
So they are going to find a big sister type of voice talking to them all about science, history, policy, with a lot of pop culture references and an approachable, relatable tone. And that was really important to me. I'm not a medical professional, but I interviewed dozens of them and people I respect tremendously in how they've navigated this area of women's health. I ask a lot of the quote unquote basic questions that women have and are never taught the answers to because of the inherent misogyny in our healthcare system, in our education system. And I really do talk through what we're talking about here. What is perimenopause? What's the vagina, the vulva, all the basic anatomy. And also why we haven't been accessing or talking about hormone therapy, what hormone therapy could be, and then various chapters with specific focuses on menopause and work or menopause and men and having that conversation, and even menopause in media. So the book is a guide. It's meant to be there for whether you want to read it all the way through or whether you want to come back and check out each chapter and look for specific resources. It's there for you when you need it.
I love that. I love that it's more than just hot flashes and night sweats because that's not just what menopause is about. It's so much more.
Right. And even that, though, I have so many friends in their 40s who will self-dismiss saying, oh, yeah, I've been, having hot flashes and night sweats and waking up. And they think there's nothing to do about it. And that's really my goal, to educate them that they do have options.
Yeah. It's so frustrating that we still have doctors saying it's just part of getting older.
I would say that's the company line. That's what I hear so often. And it's really wild. It's 2026. Let's get over that, please.
I know. What are some things you'd like to see change in the menopause space?
Certainly more education for providers. I used to take the stance sort of it's not their fault. They weren't offered this education. And my friend Jo Piazza, who's a journalist and midlife pop culture women's expert, she said, well, isn't it time that they do take it upon themselves to learn? I said, Jo, you're Absolutely right. And I always tell women, my clients or my friends, that if a doctor is dismissing you without even saying, let me look into it, or I can refer you, that's a major red flag. So I do think that there needs to be more education, whether it's proactive or part of the medical training system. I think the way we talk about menopause and women's health in the media needs to be more broad, more kind. I think women continue to not be valued in our culture. So whether it's DC, Wall Street, Hollywood, and the medical institutions, whatever it is, we need to be having these conversations. And I also really want women to feel empowered to advocate for themselves. And I know that's not easy. And I know it takes time that we don't really have. But that's why you and I do what we do, because we're all in this together.
Yeah, it is frustrating. And it is a very good point that, yes, I went to school in the early 2000s, and a lot of the doctors that are about our age did as well. And that's not an excuse anymore. You can go on to your computer and do a couple hours of continuing education, and you could get brushed up pretty quick.
Exactly. Or print out the latest guidelines from the Menopause Society or ISWISH. There are resources out there, and it shouldn't be on the women to demand better. It should be an automatic desire from our healthcare providers to actually provide care.
Yeah. One of the things I would love to advocate for is that doctors, we get all of those all the paperwork right before our annual visit, that we get the text message with the link that we have to fill out all the documents. Why not have a symptom tracker survey of midlife symptoms, and started in our late, mid 30s? It's just it's a 5-minute fill out the always, sometimes, never, and then it opens the dialogue, because there's a lot of things, especially the libido, genitourinary syndrome of menopause. Those are some really tough conversations for women to have with their doctors, and they shouldn't be the ones that have to start them.
Right. And studies show that women want to have those conversations, but they feel embarrassed or ashamed to bring it up. And then their provider likewise might feel embarrassed or might not have time, and then it doesn't get discussed. But that's such a missed opportunity. And when I was doing the research, I did find a guideline from the Menopause Society that suggested all providers start the conversation about perimenopause with their patients at 35. And I was 40 when I read that, and I started laughing, thinking no one has ever mentioned it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel about social media and its take on menopause right now?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about social media in general. I certainly, from the mental health perspective, it can be really a negative. It can lead to feelings of insecurity and comparison, and can be terrible for our sleep. But it can also be a beautiful way to connect with others who are going through similar things, or colleagues in this space. And I think that if women are able to set boundaries on it with themselves, for example, the doom scrolling in the middle of the night never helps anyone. I think that it can be really useful as an educational tool. But I will say that the doctors on social media are not your doctors. And I do think they do generally a good job of saying things like, this is my experience, or these are themes, but it might not apply to you. But I really want to emphasize that to women, that just because many people benefit from XYZ doesn't necessarily mean you will. And it's so important for you to access individualized care.
Yeah, I really think at the end of the day, women just we have to be taught to advocate for ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate that we have to, but we do.
Right. And I get that we want a quick fix, right? We millennials have grown up now with this instant gratification, the Amazon Prime delivery, I remembered that movie, let me download it in 2 seconds. But perimenopause doesn't work like that. And yes, there's information out there that might be worth exploring and applying, but it might not work for you. It might not work for you quickly. It might not work for you permanently. So please get the individualized care.
Yeah. And as we're recording this, I feel like there's a lot of things coming to light in media. Mm-hmm. One of them being, some of the doctors that we have had, they have huge followings, and they have books, and they have TV spots on a regular basis. I feel like now more than ever, I'm hopeful that, doctor as a brand idea is kind of fading away a little bit. And we're starting to really ask, like, who are these people we're trusting?
Yeah. I think everything going on right now is devastating, but I am really proud to see so many of the women that I respect in this space take a stand. It shouldn't be that hard to take a stand against pedophilia and other things, government cover-ups. But anyway, I respect that they are taking a stand. And I agree. I think that's always been the case with celebrity. It's like, well, just because someone's famous, why do we listen to them? And I think in the wellness industry in particular, there can be a ton of misinformation. And we really need to be discerning about what we're doing to our bodies and our minds when we're listening to someone who doesn't know us and we don't really know them.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I feel like there's also this kind of, and I'm asking how you feel about the line between like medicine and wellness, right? Because I went to the Menopause Society conference and I've read all the guidelines and there's a lot of it, it needs to be research based, but then there's a lot of doctors who are practicing the art of medicine and saying, I appreciate the guidelines, but I'm working every day with I've seen thousands of women and there's a lot more nuance than just the guidelines. Were you seeing that a little bit as well?
Absolutely. And again, I'm not a medical provider, but my personal approach is for something like a supplement, or we've seen, studies on CBD and menopause symptoms, and it's kind of inconclusive. But if there are treatment options out there that are not harmful, but that's the key word, right? Not harmful, and you like them and feel better with them, then I personally am okay with that, whether it's a placebo effect or maybe it does help you. But really, the key phrase is not harmful. So please don't get supplements from the internet that you don't know what they are. Please don't take vitamins that your friend is taking that you might not be deficient in. Communicate with your provider and really explore what the consequences are of doing certain things.
If you're listening to this podcast because you're trying to make sense of perimenopause or menopause, the symptoms, the medications, the supplements, the advice that never quite lines up, this is for you. My one-on-one work is different because I don't just coach from the lifestyle side or advise from the medication side. I do both. As a licensed pharmacist and certified menopause health coach, I work as your consultant and collaborator, helping you understand what's happening in your body while also helping you implement changes that actually fit your life. We look at your medications, hormone therapy options, supplements, labs when appropriate, sleep, stress, nutrition, and movement, not as separate silos, but as a connected system. When needed, I collaborate with your prescriber and local pharmacy so your care feels coordinated instead of fragmented. This isn't about replacing your medical care. It's about translating it, personalizing it, and helping you feel confident advocating for yourself. If you're tired of guessing, overwhelmed by conflicting advice, or feeling dismissed in rushed appointments, this is where clarity begins. You can book a free discovery call through the link in show notes or on my website, and we'll walk together with pharmacist-led, coach-supported care that's the next right step for you. So if a woman is reading your book and starting to recognize that there's some things that are going on in her body and in her life that totally feel like she's in the throes of perimenopause, what are some of the first steps that you suggest that she take?
So track your symptoms. And that's also a gray area in terms of where you're putting your data and your identity. So if you're using an app, make sure you know that your info is protected. Sometimes pen and paper is a good idea, but certainly track your symptoms, see what is bothering you the most, see if there are any patterns to it. Engage in self-compassion, because we often beat ourselves up for feeling or behaving a certain way, and that doesn't serve us. So if you've had a bad day, okay, tomorrow's a new day. You can apologize to the kid you yelled at, or just forgive yourself and be nice to yourself about it. And then reach out to a provider that will either help you directly or refer you to the right place. And I know I keep saying that, and I know it's not easy to find a provider. I don't mean to take that for granted. But increasingly, there are amazing telehealth platforms that can be available to anyone in all 50 states, that some of them are insurance covered or low cost, like Alloy, MIDI, Electra. Ask your provider, do you know about the guidelines? What do you know about menopause? And take care of yourself. Consider what's bothering you the most and consider how you might want to go about it, because this isn't a one and done session and then you're fixed, right? So again, have that patience, but also proactivity.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears just a little bit because we talked about the workplace and we've talked about advocating. But one of the things that a lot of providers, when we talk about menopause and we're talking about after fertility is gone, that's actually a really big issue for women, millennial women, because we're having babies later and we're still fertile and we can still get pregnant whether we want to or not. It doesn't happen as frequently. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's something I really haven't. I'm done having kids. So that's clearly selfishly not something I'm really working into. But there are a lot of women who are late 30s, early 40s that are still trying to have children. And what have you found when you've been working on your book?
Well, there are absolutely so many women who are giving birth in their late 30s, early 40s. And that number, that tendency is continuing to rise, whether it's because of career focuses or women are relying on assisted reproductive technology, which is amazing. But I think that we still kind of bury our heads in the sand when it comes to ovarian dysfunction, or the fact that eventually our ovaries will stop producing the hormones that we need to get pregnant, right? And women don't want to learn, or they say they don't want to learn about perimenopause because they just want to focus on their fertility. They want to have babies. And that's why we need more education in general about how our bodies work, about when it is time to consult with the reproductive endocrinologist if we still are intending on having babies and we're approaching our late 30s. Again, knowledge is power. And then there's a lot of work to be done internally on the identity shifts that happen between being fertile and then not being fertile or struggling with fertility. And I hear a lot of grief and loss. Even when a woman is done reproducing, she's completed her family or not, but there's still a sense of loss of, oh, I can't anymore when she's in the menopause phase. And I get that and support it. And I also think that that's a cultural piece that needs to be worked on, because women are so much more than their fertility.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I feel like a lot of our identity is tied up in our reproductive capability as a society. And the minute that is gone, we become irrelevant. And that's completely not true.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of work to be done. But
I know. How do we dismantle the system?
Exactly. And I have a line about burning down the patriarchy in my book, so don't worry.
Good. I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. And, I've talked to men about, like, how do I approach the menopause conversation with my wife? Yeah. Because, and they always say, because I want to have more sex. And it's like, okay, time out. You should probably stop right there because you're making it about you. And then we need to have a conversation that's more about how is this affecting their brain health, their bone health, their heart health, their mental well-being before we talk about your needs for your wife or your significant other,
Yeah, that's a bummer. And, I get it. I understand they want to go back to the regular sexual activity that they may have had or fantasize about or whatever. But I will say happily, and maybe that's just because of my profession as a mental health provider, that a lot of men approach me with concerns about their wife's mental health when it comes to their reproductive health. And I love to see that, right?
Thank goodness.
How can I support her? How can I talk to her about it? Because, you never want to tell a woman to calm down.
Mm-hmm. Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Don't say that. Just tell her to relax. Like, no. Yeah. But sometimes we do have to hear it from other people, right? When we're in the throes of something, we often don't recognize that maybe we're reacting disproportionately or that in a way that we never have before. And so sometimes our loved ones, our partners see it more clearly. And that can be a difficult conversation to start, but there are ways to start it. And I would say try not to start it in the heat of the moment. But, I have a whole chapter on talking to men in my book. So I think that's a good place to start.
That is a really important conversation because you're right. There are very supportive spouses who just want to help them figure it out. And it's a great place to come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what are some of the most common myths that you're actively trying to dismantle? Because there's a lot out there. What are some of the ones that just, they're the ones you want to burn down?
Yeah. So certainly the myth that menopause is an issue only for quote unquote old ladies, as if that means we shouldn't care about it anyway, but it's not, right? We know the average age of actual menopause in the US is 51, 52, and that perimenopause can last for about a decade prior. And so with all of the math involved in those and those averages and ranges, we know that women in their late 30s, early 40s are in perimenopause. And I really want women to know that and to know that that's not a curse or, that they're doomed to suffer, but I want them to know what that means. And then I really want to dismantle the myth around hormone therapy. I still, in 2026, get pushback from women who are not basing this on anything, but except for the myths that have perpetuated since the WHI, that hormone therapy is dangerous, that it causes breast cancer. And we know that it's safe and effective for most women. And we also know that there's increasingly, thankfully, more non-hormonal options and lifestyle approaches that we can use. And so I really want women to know that the symptoms are treatable and that they're not alone.
Yeah. I was talking with a provider recently about how there's a huge fear of estrogen and breast cancer, but we're not talking about how if you're drinking alcohol, you're more likely to you have a higher increased risk of breast cancer from alcohol than from estrogen.
I see that all the time. I continue to see the myth of, well, a family member had breast cancer, so I can't take hormone therapy. And then they drink a lot of alcohol. And I say, well, first of all, just because a family member had it doesn't mean that that's contraindicated for you. And second of all, if you really are intending on engaging in risk reduction, cut out the alcohol or at least cut back, right? I think we have to enjoy life, and I don't want to be punitive or make people feel like there's only one way to do things and this is the way to be healthy. But a lot of alcohol, any alcohol, really isn't good for you.
Yeah, I think that's, when I was having littles, it was the time of the graphic teas with like wine time on them and making almost a joke of moms needing their wine at, 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon and, to survive childhood with their kids or whatever. And I'm hoping that narrative is dismantled, but also just that's what we heard and that's what we started becoming accustomed to of our nightly glass of wine. And then we hear it's heart healthy, but I think people really need to understand that it is actually detrimental to your health. Yeah, it is toxic.
Yeah. And listen, I want to admit, like I'll say that and I'll have an occasional glass of wine. So I'm not trying to preach, but let's be educated about what we're consuming and the practices that we're engaging in. And also, why do moms need a glass of wine to take the edge off? Why is the edge so sharp, right? And that speaks to the bigger macro system of our culture and the pressures on women and mothers. And are we going to solve for that in this hour of a podcast? No, but I think our conversations are helping to solve for that. And that's why we all have to keep talking.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're talking to women that have read the book, what is their feedback? Like, what are they saying to you after have they had their aha moments? Like, what are those aha moments for your readers?
I have been hearing a lot of thanks because they really started reading with no knowledge. And frankly, I started writing with very little knowledge. So it really is that kind of guide of let's learn together. and they now recognize symptoms. Just this week, my friend was telling me about her shoulder was bothering her. She didn't pull it. She didn't do anything. And she said, oh, now I recognize, it might be frozen shoulder. Let me look into it. They appreciate all of the resources I provide, from the professional organizations to the social media accounts and other books that I feel are really excellent. And they feel like they got the education and information that they deserve. My book is not a prescription. It's not a one size fits all. It's a starting point, and it's meant to really ensure women feel like they have resources.
I think being seen is really important for women in the menopause space. And I felt that I was too young to talk about it for a very long time, being somebody who's interviewing doctors or talking to women experiencing menopause, that I felt like I wasn't in this space because I haven't experienced menopause yet. Am I too young to talk about menopause? And I think that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah. And you're so educated and in this space. And so I feel for the women who they don't know the terms. They don't know where to go and what to say. And we all deserve better. And I think that I'm hopeful that it can only get better as we continue to have these conversations. But certainly we need the funding for research. We need access to healthcare providers in all areas. There's currently a deficit of gynecologists in many parts of the country. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I do hope and believe we're doing our part.
I know. Oh, our healthcare system.
I know. And it's tough because we're having a menopause moment, rightfully so, but simultaneously as women's reproductive rights are being stripped away. And we can't ignore that because it's all part of the same conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and right now it's the estrogen shortage, the patch shortage. Right. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me?
It's infuriating.
Yeah. I checked the FDA website. There's no official shortage, but Australia talks about it. They said they've been talking about this for a long time, and they said that their shortage isn't expected to diminish until December of 2026. And I feel like we could put satellites up in space and and we can clone animals. Why can we not figure out a shortage of estrogen patches?
I say that all the time. I look at my phone and I think, wow, we can do so much with just this phone. And yet women are suffering from, really solvable things. And yet we're not solving them. But again, that speaks to, who's in charge, who has the funding. And so I recently spoken in events and women were asking, well, what can we do? And I said, fund if you can, keep talking about it, keep learning, and talk to your kids so that the next generation will focus on these issues and value women and engage in the practices that we know we deserve.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on testosterone and the restrictions on testosterone for women in the United States?
I think it's a joke, an unfunny joke, that there is not a approved method or dosing for women, and yet men have all of these products. And for example, the libido drugs like Viagra was fast-tracked for FDA approval within 6 months. Now we have Addyi and Vyleesi, but very few people even know about that. And of course, not everything works for everyone to begin with. So we need more options. We need more research. I hope that the restrictions on testosterone are lifted because it's another burden that women don't deserve to bear. And I hope that more providers get the education on how to properly dose it, use it off label. We're seeing so many women get pellets from med spas because they're desperate and because it helps them. But we also know that that can be dangerous. So there's an unmet need here that can be met. Let's do it.
Yeah. I talked with a nurse practitioner who has used pellet therapy in her practice for decades, and she's very cautious about it, and she's very educated and trained, and she knows it's not FDA approved in the US. They use it in Europe. So she has her own opinions about it, but she even said the med spa providers who go to an 8-hour weekend summit at a nice hotel who learn about how to do this and find it a cash grab are the ones that are causing a lot of problems for women with pellet therapy. So that's another thing I wish women would understand, is that like know who you're getting your medicines from as well, because that's implanted under your skin and it can't come out. It's there.
Exactly. And pellet therapy can be an option. It shouldn't be the only option. And as you said, know who you're getting it from. And I do want to believe the best of everyone and think, those med spa providers, they're not trying to hurt anyone, but they don't have the right resources, education, training, materials to work with. And so when women are desperate, we've all been there, we make decisions urgently. We shouldn't be in this position. We should have access to the tools that we know are safe and effective if used properly.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how, as pharmacists, because I'm a licensed pharmacist in 2 states, and I've had to do, whenever I go to get my license renewal, there are requirements that come up. Like we've had equity training that's required for all pharmacists in the state, or I had to do HIV/AIDS education in the state of Washington, death with dignity in Oregon. So like all sorts of things that are specific to the state, and it's a requirement to renew your license. Why are we not having menopause just be one simple CE? It doesn't need to be all 15 hours for your year, but just one simple CE. Because I also, every time I get onto social media and hear a doctor complain about a patient's experience in a pharmacy, my heart breaks for the women who finally get the prescription, go to the pharmacy, and they're made to be embarrassed, or they're told they can't have it, or it's dangerous and they won't fill it. And also, I know the roadblocks and the barriers for pharmacists, and they're not just lack of education, but there are a lot of structured restrictions in the pharmacy setting that prevent us from doing what we want to do for our patients. So that's another side of it that really needs to change.
Absolutely. And I love your perspective as a pharmacist and also mine as a mental health professional, because in some ways we're considered allied healthcare professionals. And we are all in this together, and we need to talk to our professional organizations. We need to teach colleagues. I teach a lot of mental health providers about perimenopause and the mental health symptoms that we might see. We need to vote for politicians who care about women's health, because this does affect everybody. Every woman goes through menopause. Estrogen receptors are all throughout her body. So whether you specialize in neuro health or cardiovascular health, or you're a pharmacist or therapist, you've got to know, you've got to learn. And we're seeing some states enact legislation around continuing ed, but it's moving quite slowly. So we got to keep being loud.
I know. I think it definitely takes a lot of voices, unfortunately. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Rachel Rubin, and she was talking about the studies for erectile dysfunction with like a fear that your penis can explode. It's still okay and it gets improved by the FDA, but something for women's libido, it's like the hoops and the rigmarole that she had to go through to get that approved is insane.
Insane. But let's get loud.
Yeah, we need to. So moving forward, beyond this book, what do you want to do for menopause? Like, what are you doing in the space?
So like I said, I've been doing a lot of trainings on menopause and perimenopause and mental health for fellow providers, which has been really wonderful to learn, to educate, to connect. I do a lot of speaking events for lay women and people. I was just in Gainesville, Florida. We had a few lovely men in the audience with Dr. Lisa Chaco, who's in Florida. And I love when men come. I love when women who are much older come and participate and share their wisdom. I love when kids come and learn. It's so important, no matter who you are, to learn. So I really enjoy the education and the events around it. And then, of course, my day-to-day life of working with women on improving their coping mechanisms to stressors, whether they're hormonal or not. That's so important to me. And just providing psychoeducation around perimenopause and this is what's happening to you and here's who you can call. That's so fulfilling. And I just want to help as many women as possible.
Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in this. There needs to be more of you out there. I will have a link for your book in the show notes and how to find you on social media and all of your events that you're at. Do you have a website as well we could put on the show notes?
Yes. So if you go to millennialmenopause.com, it will bring you to where the links wherever the book is sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc., and also to my website, which has a list of events that I'm doing. I am not yet coming to your area, but let's make it happen. That would be fun.
I think we should book club the hell out of this, by the way.
Yes, I agree. It's a fun read. Like if you like millennial pop culture, you'll love the book. It opens with a reference to Mean Girls. It's 90210, Backstreet Boys, all the good things with the science and the policy and the research and the information that you deserve.
Which is how we talk to our girlfriends, right?
Exactly.
Like we talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, and then we talk about vaginal dryness all in the same conversation. So that's great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had so much fun getting to meet you and hear all about your book. And I really do believe we should literally just book club the hell out of this.
Let's do it.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for listening to this episode of Women Mastering Midlife. If something you heard today resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with a friend who might need a little extra support on her midlife journey. Remember, small changes can make a big difference, and you don't have to navigate this transition alone. We will be back next week with more expert guidance and compassionate conversations to help empower you to master midlife on your terms. Until then, you can find us on Instagram at Women Mastering Midlife, or come connect with me directly at Miss Victoria Byrd. And you're looking for deeper connection and support, be sure to join us in the Women Mastering Midlife community. We'd love to continue the conversation with you there. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review this podcast. It helps us reach more amazing women mastering midlife just like you. You'll find all the links from today's episode and ways to connect in the show notes below. See you next time.